Hi, my name is Steve Warren. I'm Technical Development for TTW Group. We're going to look at installing a camera today in this car. It'll be the My Witness. We're going to install the front camera and we're going to install the rear camera, and we'll use the SmartPower at the same time. The various parts of the kit, obviously the SmartPower is what controls the camera in parking mode, protects your car battery, so when you leave your car unattended for a few days, if the battery gets below a certain voltage, it will shut the camera down so you can still come back to your car and start your car. And we'll look at the installation of the rear camera. In this case, this is a hatchback car, so we'll show you the best place to install the rear camera. At all the times that you see this installed today, we do recommend that if you're in any doubt whatsoever, you should speak to an installer and get it professionally installed. But the front camera itself is very simple to install. Right, we've got the main kit, My Witness. We've got the SmartPower unit that we're going to install behind the dashboard, and this is part of the second camera. So we've got the second camera here, which will go in the rear of the car, and then the extension cable for the second camera. Inside the box, you've got everything you need to get going. So we've got the main part. We've got the camera. So there's the camera with its mounting bracket. The other components in there are obviously the SD card reader, some cable clips and a spare sticky, power cable, SD card, and then at the bottom we've got a quick start guide. So we'll have a look at the first stage at the moment, which is where we're going to put the camera. What we would advise anyone to do is just take your time, get all the components out, lay them out on the passenger seat, and then have a look at where the various positions are that you're going to decide to mount the camera. Well, obviously the first thing you need to do is check where you're going to put the camera and where you're going to run the cables. Things to bear in mind in modern cars, airbags is one of them, and also the position of the camera on the windscreen. You don't want to break any laws by having the camera right in the middle of the windscreen. That's the last thing you want to do. And also curtain airbags. The typical method of running a cable along a car is along the roof lining and then down the A-pillar, and then you'll come in through the side down here somewhere and into the dashboard, or you'll run under the dashboard down to the 13 amp socket. So the first thing we need to do, make sure the windscreen is nice and clean, free from any grease and dirt, and then just sort of hold the camera around the rear view mirror area and decide on a position from there. Okay, what we've done is we've put the cable in the side of the camera. That just allows us to know where to put the camera in relationship to the cable. And the obvious place for this camera is the bracket on the black surface here, and then the camera to one side. The other thing to bear in mind is fire the wipers up. So in this case we'll turn the ignition on and we'll see the way the wipers go. Pointless putting the camera in a position where it's going to see a dirty screen. So in this case here you can see the wipers are clearly going past where the camera is. So if we turn the wipers off now, we know the position of the camera is roughly going to be in this area. We also know that the camera is out of the driver's view, so it's not going to distract the driver. And looking at it carefully, we just need to make sure that we can get the mirror adjustment, so when we turn the mirror it doesn't bang on the camera, but we can also get the power cable out if we need to. So pretty well this position here would be the ideal position. We get the sticky backing off, and again just take your time, make sure you're happy with the position, and then stick the camera on nice and level. And that's it, that's the camera mounted. Obviously we can reach up behind and get the power cable out, and the power cable will go nice and neatly up to the roof lining at this point here. Right, we've got the camera into position, and what we'll do now is, just for ease of use, we'll move the mirror out the way, and we can obviously take the cable in and out quite easily. The camera, we need to leave the cable into the camera, and then what we're going to do is we're going to tuck this cable up under the roof lining. Now most roof linings are fairly forgiving, and there's plenty of room to tuck a bit of cable up there. We'll tuck a bit of excess cable into this position here, so if we ever need to move the camera, and then carefully just lifting off the roof lining off the glass, you can tuck the cable quite comfortably up under the roof lining and along the roof lining until we get to the corner. And at this point here we'll just tidy it up onto the corner. Right, at this point here where you're coming across the roof lining, remember what I said, if you've got a curtain airbag down here you need to be careful about that, and you would normally run this cable along the front of the windscreen, between the windscreen and the trim. In this case this car doesn't, so what we can do is we can take the corner of this trim and we can push the cable in, and it's probably hard to show you, but we can tuck this cable in here out the way, and then what we can do is we can move the cable along this position here, and it disappears behind the trim down to where we're heading is for the rubber seal on the door. So we're now across here and we've now met the rubber door seal, and what we'll do is we'll move the camera around to the other side so you can see what I'm going to do at this point here. But what we've clearly got is no cable showing here, trim's all out the way, so it's nice and neat, no cables showing all the way along the roof lining right up to the camera. As you saw, we'd come round the top of the trim and we've now come out the other side, and all we literally do is lift the rubber up and run our finger and the cable underneath the rubber, and we can do that all the way down until we get to a position. You can see here we can just make it nicely disappear, you wouldn't know it was there, and the same down here. Some installers will run underneath the trim. You don't need to do that in most cases, and we're just going to continue down this trim, this rubber seal, until we get to the bottom of the dashboard. And you'll see here this is a good enough place to stop. Trim's all gone, so you don't know that there's any cable there, and at this point here we can choose to take the cable along underneath the dashboard. And basically there are various areas on dashboards that come away, but what we'll do is you can see here that if we pull this trim here, this is the trim for the fuse box, so we can take that away. We can decide whether we come into the fuse box or up underneath the fuse box. So here is a position under the fuse box, so we're now just tidy this up a little bit so we're pretty well there, and we've come up underneath the fuse box to tuck the cable out the way, and this will hold the cable up. So you can use cable clips, and at the same point here at the other side, I don't quite know whether you'll see this with the camera view, but down here at this point we've got a 12-volt socket, so we can plug our camera into this 12-volt socket if we wanted to, and then obviously we can bring this cable along this edge down here. And remember, you've got some cable clips in the pack as well, allow you to go, and then we can bring this cable back up underneath the dashboard using some cable clips, and then the excess cable you pull up, get the right cable, you pull up the excess cable, and basically we can use some cable clips down here to sort the unit out. Camera's already fired up, it's saying that there's no SD card, that's because I've not put the SD card in. And then the excess cable, you can wrap this, you can tuck this out the way, so in the case here we can tuck it up here out the way, and again just get rid of that excess. Obviously a little bit of tape, but because I'm going to do something slightly different with the camera, I'm not going to tape this, but again we can tape this, we can place the trim back on the top on here, and we're now in a position where the camera's installed, and really the only two places where you're seeing cable is obviously this corner and down here, but the camera is now working and we're good to go. And that's really how simple it is to install the camera. Anything further from that would be installing the likes of the SmartPower and the second camera. Doesn't get much simpler, to be honest, and that's the basic install of a MyWitness, a do-it-yourself job. The other stage from that would be, as I say, what we're going to do is we're going to take off this piece of trim, and we're going to bring the power cable from down here into the fuse box. So at the moment I'm going to leave this to one side, we'll just leave this cable down here, and we're going to look at installing the SmartPower into the fuse box. We've got 3 wires to install. This is really designed for an auto electrician. I wouldn't go any other way unless you're a competent DIYer or it's a relatively older car. Modern cars are CAN bus orientated. What we have is a female cigarette lighter socket. We have our SmartPower module, and on the side of the SmartPower module we have our high and low switch for the power, and then we have 3 wire connections. I'm going to do those connections into the fuse box. We've got some spare fuse ways, I've marked them on the fuse box here. There's one down here and one up here. One is permanent live and one is a switch live. I'm going to make some crimp connections to go into that fuse box. I'll tape all the wiring up, and then the next part of the camera sequence you'll see will be me just tidying the cables up. But we're not going to go into any detail on this for obvious reasons. It's up to you to decide whether you're going to install this yourself or you'll get a professional installer to do it. Our advice is, any doubt, get a professional installer. Right, as you can see here, we've got a couple of wires that we've added in here in the SmartPower. SmartPower is now monitoring the vehicle's battery. It's taking off the yellow wire, which is our permanent live, and our white wire, which is our ignition live. And the SmartPower is set for 12.2 volts. If the vehicle's battery goes below 12.2 volts, this will shut the camera down and stop the camera from taking any more power from the vehicle, which means you can still start the vehicle in the morning. We would recommend that you have a professional installer do this, or at least have some good knowledge of cars, because if you come off the wrong circuit you can upset the car. There are some vehicles that monitor the supply and will immediately throw up an error if they see any voltage being taken from the car when the key's out the ignition. Right, as I said earlier, in this car we've got the front camera in and we're looking to put the second camera in, so we've got the little mini second camera and its extension cable. Now the way that this would work is, obviously we'll find a position for the rear camera, which we've already done in this car, and I'll show you that in a minute. The extension cable we need to get from the front to the back of the car now, so this is a 4 metre long extension lead. Loads and loads of cable to deal with, but we have to deal with all sorts of different sizes of cars. 90-degree plug plugs into the camera, and it's exactly the same principle. So we'll plug into the camera. In this case we'll move the mirror so I can get to the camera connection, and then we'll run this cable up, and we'll tidy these cables up afterwards when we're done. But again, same rule, so we tuck up behind the roof lining, we'll chuck some excess up there, so if we need the excess we've got it, and then we run across the roof lining until we get to the corner yet again, and we get to the corner, and then usually you can push it into the corner, and then if you just push your finger on the roof lining part, you'll find that that will disappear into there, and then you can obviously, that's gone. And then what we'll do is we'll do exactly the same principle in this case, so we're going to tuck it behind this trim, and we'll go along to this point here, and at that point we'll do what we did on the other side, except rather than go down and along here, we're going to go up along the rubber trim, along the roof lining, until we get to the back of the car, and that's where we'll meet the camera next. Right, as promised, we'll show you the rear camera. On the back of the car we've mounted the rear camera on the metal of the hatch. Often you'll need to mount it onto the glass. In this case we've put it on the hatch just because we wanted a bit more of a discreet install. Just make sure that when you do mount it onto the hatch that you don't mount it in a position that when you shut the hatch it will hit the rubbers or get crushed. And we've used the grommets that cover the rear brake light hole, the rear brake light screws. We've used the grommets there to run the cable into, and then we've gone down to the main seal and then into the roof, and we've hidden everything underneath the roof lining. This would be more of a professional install because you have to be careful when you take these apart, mainly on the basis that there's delicate electronics in some of these, and in others there's obviously fine cables that are running between the two. So don't go gun-ho into these unless you really know what you're doing. But overall the camera sits there nicely, and then obviously when we drop the roof down, we're now in a position where the camera is incredibly discreet, yet it's in the back of the car to cover whatever happens from behind the vehicle, and then obviously the front camera is doing the recording on the front. And that's it. That's basically the install of a My Witness. Rear camera, front camera, job done.